Hello, I'm just going to give a very quick narrated version of this so that people, if you're following the slides, the animations and so on make sense. I'm not going to give the whole talk again now. Okay, so these are our kind of buzzwords. These are the kind of things we're going to talk about in the session. Video, we can make interactive. Very straightforward. So in this one, I've popped in a bit where a student can record what they think is the aim of the study. We can do the same thing again with the method and the results and so on. We can also pop in some multiple choice questions, and those can be adaptive in the sense that the student doesn't necessarily have the ability to proceed if they don't get this right. That's up to you. So we can put little bite-sized modules in as well. This is a very short one where I've just got a video and a couple of questions to check the understanding, but would make a nice flipping exercise. You can have self-marked exam questions. Try and answer this yourself and hit check and you'll see. It'll give you a mark and it'll also show you the mark scheme. You can put whole courses on here. So this is just a set of those interactive presentations with questions and then an exam at the end. Adaptive learning is an interesting one, very popular at the moment. This essentially just means the course content modifies as the learner progresses through it according to their responses. So you can have hard adaptive learning. What that essentially means is it's all automated. The decisions are made for the learner. And so here in that course I've just shown you online, you can make part 2 of the final assessment dependent on passing the first part. Now, an alternative to that, which philosophically I kind of prefer, soft adaptive learning. And this means the learner is making the decisions as they go. And here's an example. If you ever use the Kudos Careers software, this is just a course on how to use that. So straight away we get a choice. Do we want to do it by video or by the brochure? We can look at the brochure, we can look at a case study if we want. Now we can see those again, or we can watch the introductory video. And then when we're ready, we can see the detailed instructions and see how to do it. No assessment in this one. This is purely how to do something. We can use 3D. Now, again, a lot of hype about this. Don't let anyone tell you that if you are not doing everything in the immersive environment, you're so last century. It can be gimmicky, but I think it's got some really nice applications. So here we have a brain. I can choose what bit we're going to look at by section. We can rotate it in 360 degrees. You can see, and we can get the information from it. A lot nicer than drawing a brain on the board, especially if your art skills are anything like mine. A couple of subject-specific things. This is it's very simple technology. It's a Google form that just asks you questions with a range of formats and response to help you just whiz through evaluating a theory. And there's a similar one around for evaluating a study. The idea is, by the time you've answered all those questions, you've got a very detailed evaluation. And by the time you've done that a few times, the idea is you'll probably, to some extent, start internalizing that dialogue in a kind of Vygotsky way. And you should be able to evaluate without those cues in front of you. It's another little evaluation tool. This is a chatbot. So, do you need a hand evaluating a study? Yes, please. So it's going to start us off, prompts to think about ethical issues first. Yes, I'd like to know about ethical issues. So again, it's going to give me a little prompt. And you can carry on with this dialogue. It'll tell you about these. You can have it show videos, show external links to pages of information, however you want to set that up. The idea is it's the kind of dialogue that you would have with a student if you didn't want to give away the answer. And the great thing about that is it doesn't have to be that clever to do that. It doesn't have to know lots of answers. It just has to know enough to prompt you in the right direction. And that's more educational than if this were actually really intelligent and could answer all your questions in detail. Okay. This is another psychology specific thing, some statistical tools. This one's from the Pimp My Psycho website. You're choosing a test. We're going to go for correlation. We're going to go for interval data. It's correctly saying it's a Pearson's. We can now see the video of how to carry that out by hand, or we can carry it out online. And students can just practice with that as many times as they like. Here's another simulation tool. Now, here we can change the correlation coefficient. We can change the number. We can do things like introduce outliers to show the impact on the correlation coefficient. We can clear those added points away. Again, it's an awful lot better than drawing this on the board. Okay, you may have heard of Eliza, the Rogerian psychotherapist chatbot. And Eliza will emulate, as best she can, a person-centered therapist. It's fun. It's not that intelligent. It's just fun. Now, this is a radical one, push microlearning. This is based on the idea of reducing cognitive load by pushing small chunks of information out to learners. Now, a classic example of that, a classic example of that would be the glossary function in Moodle. So here we are. I've got my random glossary entry of the day on acetylcholine. Now, the great thing about that glossary function is you don't have to just use it for a glossary. You can use it for everything that you want it to push out randomly to students. It could be exam questions, it can be details of theories and studies, whatever you like. The idea is once it's in there, it's going to randomly come out. You don't have to think about it. Gamification, again, huge buzzword. I would hope everyone knows about Kahoot. It's fantastic. Students just love it. And of course, if you use the tracking function within Kahoot to make a little mark book, you can use it as a serious assessment tool as well. You can track student progress. Also, if you've got something like Moodle, there are games within that. So crosswords, for example, all sorts of things. Now, this is a little visualization. It's a psychology timeline. So we can go through the eras and go through specific things. And when I click on that, it's just a way of linking to something more specific. So I could follow that to my Milgram BLE page. Okay. Everything on here is free at the point of delivery. Obviously, that's not the same as saying there are no costs. It's time consuming. You have to know about the reliability of the technology before you can use it live in the classroom. With some things, there are issues of sensitive data. Unfortunately, the kind of American sites where you upload classes of students by name and then you can do all sorts of quizzing and recording of the information, not GDPR compliant. They're a no-no. But as long as you're not using sensitive data, there's no you don't have to. Nothing has to be a walled garden. You do not have to stay within the technology of your institution. I think that's a really important point. I think there are some really daft IT policies out there. Buy-in. If you don't get buy-in from your students and your management and your technologists at work, you're always going to be up against it. So cultivate the relationships, pilot things, and ask people for their views. It's always going to be a bit of a learning curve. Some of the technology I've shown here has quite an easy learning curve. Some of them are quite steep, but none of them require coding, so they should be possible to learn. And finally, think about the impact on the learning, because that's where you're ultimately going with this. There is good reason to believe that if students engage in stuff and that it mirrors the kind of ways they would use technology outside formal learning, there's every reason to suppose it will have a positive